Well, thank you for indulging us all, Nils and me, to head down to the gallery and come back. But we will have our introduction by Nils's advisor for his honors project, and that is Professor Brian Kyle.
So I wanted to start quickly by telling a story. For 14 years, I've been teaching a introductory level digital photography class. And about 3 years ago, I have an assignment that I normally teach that's, I don't expect good writing from my photography students. And so I have an assignment where I ask as simply as possible, find photos in our library. Our library has a wonderful collection of photography books. I say, go to the library, find photos you like, show me them, and tell me a couple things you like about them. So 3 years ago, I got a paper turned in for that project that instead of the 3 or 4 sentences that I was expecting, I was pretty sure somebody had either had AI write or lifted from the pages of like Susan Sontag or Terry Barnett or Roland Barthes, and I was like, this student thinks I'm foolish. And then the more I read their paper, I realized that they were talking very specifically about photos that were plucked from a variety of sources, and I realized that there was no way that this could have been manufactured, and that was really like my first time that Nils jumped out of the pack of students that I've had as somebody that was really worth maybe starting a friendship with, especially as we talked about criticism of art and things like that, where grad school was the time that I started to enjoy those kind of conversations. And even though I teach at a college, we rarely get to have them. And Nils Anderson is the student that I've found most easy to engage in those kind of in-depth conversations, and advising him for this project was no exception to the joy I had of learning alongside Nils through this process. So I hope you enjoy his presentation.
Now I'm supposed to give a talk? Whoa.
Just pretend we're in honors class and you're having a discussion. It won't be a problem.
There you go.
It's never a problem then.
Well, normally I'm not so moved right beforehand, but thank you, Brian, for the introduction. And I already have a timer going. I don't even need my phone. Lovely. So, as you all have already seen just a few minutes ago down in the art gallery, my project is not a paper. It doesn't really involve research in the traditional sense, and I don't have a real sort of thesis, despite the fact that it is a thesis. That might not be true. I have a sentence I'm getting to in just a second. But this is a little different from your normal honors research presentations. So you have already all had an experience with the art, and I'm hoping now, through this presentation, to give you a little bit more context into at least what I, the author, intended, although by no means am I telling you what it meant. So, brief overview of what we're going to hopefully get to in this presentation, if I can keep a lid on it, is more or less what I hope it explores, how I think I'm doing that, what inspired me to get to this point, and then I'm hoping to dedicate a big chunk of time to your questions, presuming you have them. I sure hope you do. So, in a sentence, Machine for Lying invites you to explore the relationship between your internal and external self. Now, boiling it down to that one sentence was painful. Through this project, I started out thinking about what I was going to do for my thesis as a film student pretty much since I got here. There's a big emphasis in the film program and in the film department on thesis project and what you're going to do, and I thought that I was going to do some kind of show Bible and like a script, or maybe a series of shorts, or maybe a longer form thing, or maybe I would work on other people's projects. I didn't know what I was doing, but I bounced around a lot. And then October 2025, I remember it like it was a million years ago, we had our BFA thesis seminar where I sort of realized, oh my God, I can't do any of these things that I think I'm going to do. Not because I literally cannot do them, because I should not do them, because I know I can do them. That whatever I would have been doing would have just been sort of pro forma and performative. And so that started a long process of bouncing around, and just earlier Brian described it as this right here, what you've just seen rather down there, is the result of notebooks upon notebooks full of scrapped ideas, explorations, new directions, little experimental pieces, and frankly, a reinvigoration and rediscovery of my relationship to my own creativity. So, along those lines, as an artist, I'm just going to read this to you now, although many of you may have already had a chance to read it. As an artist, I often feel trapped by the tyranny of images. Why? In their essence, they are not the thing itself, and yet reality is so often only accessible to us through representation, symbolism, and substitution. This piece was born of an effort to reconcile the image I project with the reality I experience. It is a mirror. I invite you to consider what you can see, what you cannot, and how your position, movement, and speed changes what you see, here between the eye and the image. So, those are some nice words, I think so anyway. I slaved over that artist statement. Brian did too. And what I'm hoping to achieve with this piece, and what I'm hoping you're maybe getting at least slightly out of that artist statement, is at the end of the day, even though I moved through about 6 million different ideas before I finally settled on this one, I wanted to find some way to create a spatial relationship between the audience and the art. I wanted to find a way to make the encounter happen, not on the level of here on a screen where you sit and you watch like in a theater, or not on the level of a painting on a wall, or even some other form of art where we understand it as the object itself. What I really wanted to create was an experience, and so installation art was a pretty obvious direction to head. Now, there's a line in here, which if I'm being entirely honest with y'all, I got from a SpongeBob meme on Instagram, but it is in my head forever, and that is resolving thematic tension at the level of form. Maybe that's Sontag, maybe that's some other critic I don't know the name of, I'm not sure, but I got it from Instagram. And ever since, it has been stuck in my head as the only thing that I'm concerned with doing. Well, not the only, but one of the only things. The primary concern that I have when I'm working on an art piece is finding a way to make the piece itself, whatever it is, whether it's writing, photography, installation, whatever creative pursuit I may be engaging in, that the thing itself, of itself, is in somehow related to what I am trying to say, and that the form should be relevant to what I am trying to communicate. Now, taking a step back, that for me was important to create that spatial relationship because my experience of identity and my experience of awareness of self and of the world beyond is necessarily wrapped up in a sort of triangulation. There is a part of me that you all see, and I don't mean to say that any of these parts are more or less real than any of the others, but there is a part of me that you all see and that you all know. And then there is a version of me that you see, which then you all have in your heads, independent of one another. And there is the part of me that has the urges, the fears, the hopes, the dreams, that informs the version that I present to you, and then that from which you all create your understanding of who I am. Me, what I am, who I am, the observer there, the awareness, the point at which I can definitively say, this is me and this is not me, is a very blurry line. I have a hard time with that. And I wanted to create a piece that invites us to explore that relationship a little bit more than maybe we do in a standard way when we talk about, truisms like, no one grows up in the same family, or, everyone you meet meets you differently. As an artist and as a filmmaker, a lot of this came from a desire to explore the way in which our media, our representations, our images inform that triad, inform that dynamic, because we do not only form our understanding of ourselves in relationship to other people, we form our understanding of ourselves in relationship to the music, the clothes, the films that we watch, these representations, these versions of reality that are as much saying something about what we imagine or what we wish as what is. But on an emotional level and on, in many ways, a practical level, we take them as reality, even if we suspend our disbelief, and they inform how we imagine who we are and what place we have in society. So, the primary elements of the piece are a camera, a projector, the screen, and a secret fourth one, you. The camera, the projector, and the screen all serve a sort of dual purpose. As a filmmaker and as an artist who works in the medium of film and photography, and these most fidelitus, these forms of art that have the greatest degree of fidelity to reality, where it's very easy for us to confuse, if I showed you a photo of a dog just now, and if I was thinking ahead, I would have put one in here. But you might say, oh, a dog. And being the pedantic contrarian, I might say, oh no, it's a photo of a dog. And that distinction might be slight, but I think it is important, and it's a big part of what this piece is trying to get at. And so for me, these three elements all sort of serve a dual purpose. Yes, they are a camera, a projector, and a screen, but I intend for them also to stand in for the observer, the performer, and the interface, which are words I'm introducing to you just now, but which I would like to map onto that conversation or that description I provided earlier about the version you understand of me, the version I present, and the part that's only in here. The difficulty that I've had in talking about this piece comes in large part, and you will forgive me, I am overheating. The large part of the difficulty that I've had in speaking about this piece comes from the fact that through the process of creating it, I have become a very different person. And so when I talk about it and when I share about it, I struggle not to turn it into personal story time or testimony. That is also sort of the point, which is where the trouble comes in. Through my relationship to creativity, through my relationship to the images that I create, to self-expression, I have become a different person. And this contraption, machine, I admit the name, A Machine for Lying, came sort of out of coincidence. It was a phrase I came up with while trying to describe to someone how frustrated I was trying to describe to them what I was doing. And the whole process that I felt like I was engaged in, trying to justify my creative journey. And so, in a real way, this piece and what it is, I discovered it as much as I discovered myself through the process of creating it. I, as I said, went through so many different iterations, so many different formats and mediums, from editorial photography to short form poetic video to documentary to other forms of installation and sculpture, that I really didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I was finding a new way to understand myself. And so this piece, being a mirror, is, I think, of itself, it is a reflection of the work that I put into my relationship to creativity, which maybe we're getting a little abstract, a little airy here. I'm going to bring us back down to earth. So I have some artistic inspirations and influences, which some of you I expect will be familiar with some of them, and many of them I expect none of you will have ever seen or heard of before, because they took some finding. But the first one, I think, is the one that you're all most likely to know. Like I said, it's not a dog. It's a photo of a dog. This isn't a painting of a pipe. This is a photo of a painting of a pipe. So René Magritte really is the primary inspiration as an artist for all of this work. This piece and the next one I'm about to show you, in some ways, beat me to the punch by about 100 years. They're saying more or less the same thing in a different format and in a different medium and with a different set of connotations and implications and, you know, all the nitty-gritty stuff. But more or less, these two pieces really, for me, are the basis of the whole project, the whole work. Moving along, the next piece, which is perhaps structurally the most similar, is TV Buddha, which was created by a Korean and American artist who specialized in video art, just recently passed away. And he created this piece sort of as a protest to the... It was literally made to fill space. There was a opening in a gallery that had been supposed to be filled, fell through, and they went to him and was like, can you make something for us to just kind of fill in? Mm-hmm. And this is what he produced. Structurally, there's obviously a lot of similarities, but I relate, and I have to be careful about how I say this, but I relate a little bit to that spirit of protest. I have struggled to know exactly, putting myself into a box, creating a poster, creating a slide deck, creating a presentation for my BFA and for my honors presentation to say, this is who I am, this is what I am, this is the sum of it. I'm leaving things out. And in a way, it feels sort of self-indulgent. When I first started this process back at that seminar I mentioned, I was asked, I was sort of freaking out, and I subjected many of my long-suffering professors to an anxious question and answer session. And while expressing some of my concerns, one of them said, well, don't worry about all that. If you just don't think about it, if you could make anything that you wanted to make, what would it be? If you could do anything you wanted to do, what would you do? And the answer that I had for them at the time, and the answer that I still sort of have, is probably not make art. I'm thinking, and Nick, I'm gonna call you out here specifically because this was the community garden thing. I literally said to them in the point, I would start a garden, smile at strangers. I would, try and change my relationship to the people around me, build community, encourage understanding. And I don't know that an art piece for a grade was going to do that. And I don't think this piece does necessarily. But what it did do is it helped me change who I am so that I can be that person, so that I can build that community, that I can be present, that I can show up with people like that. And that's worthwhile, I think. So another one that you're probably going to get the inspiration here pretty quick. Another video artist, active in the 70s. Partly what speaks to me about this piece is, I have photos of it from other angles. It is the constriction, it's the narrowing, it's the tunnel vision. We focus in, I think, I do anyway, I should speak for myself perhaps. But I really tend to focus in on the image, the representation. I can get so lost in the abstract and the airy and the thoughtful that I can totally lose track of what's actually here. And to me, I feel some of that here, and that's partly what I was trying to capture with my narrowed tunnel. So the next one, again, no points if you recognize the inspiration. This is also perhaps one of the biggest influences. The way that the image changes over time, the way that it is projected across multiple screens, the way that your ability to interface with it is different depending on your positionality to it. Bill Viola, I have another piece of his coming right up, and I'm going to move along here because I want to have time for your questions. This also is perhaps one of the single biggest influences for me. To me, this piece is the most spatial. It is the most about the audience's physical relationship to the piece and about how they move through space. Being presented with a room where you have to lean over, make yourself vulnerable, look down, narrow your focus and your attention into just this one point. That is, though not the same effect that I was trying to achieve, the level of positionality in space in this piece is something that inspired me and something that I was trying to recreate. So wrapping up here, because I want to have about 10 minutes for your questions. The final thing is sort of going back to what I was saying about smiling at strangers and starting a community garden. I think we can get kind of lost in the sauce. There's more information, there is more representation, and those representations, those images, they have more connotative meaning than maybe ever before, and they can come to replace reality. We can read the news all we want. We can engage in whatever symbolic act as much as we like, but there is a reality that's present and available to us all the time. Here in this room, and here on this planet, wherever you go after this and throughout the rest of today. And I think that creating spaces and opportunities to reflect on the fact that we live in, the Matrix, pardon me, but that we live in a system that is ever desperate for our attention and ever desperate to convince us that all these ephemeralities are of vital and critical importance. Creating time to disentangle yourself from that a little bit. And remember, we're here, I am in my body, and where I move and where I stand and how I act changes how I see these things and how it sees me. And how I see myself. So, that's all I got.
Okay, any questions for Nils?
How much did this project change you? And the
Well,
way you see the world?
I'm not sure that I can put all the credit on just the project, but I will say that a confluence of other factors and having to actually focus and commit myself to a project that really didn't have any purpose other than me. I made this for me, and I really struggled with that. Throughout a lot of my time here at school, I've been really dedicated to trying to be what I thought other people needed, which made me not very good at either doing that or enjoying being alive. And so having to really focus in on creating a work of art that was for no person other than me and for no reason other than that I wanted to make it, changed my relationship to a lot of people and to myself and how I felt like I needed to behave and how I needed to relate, which is maybe a bit vague, but it's very gory details. Yeah, sorry.
I was just curious, you said you had a lot of previous iterations.
Yeah.
Which of the previous iterations shows up the most in this? Or is there like no relationship to anything prior to this, or did you like slowly get to this point?
They're definitely all related, but I would say that this piece is pretty far from anything else in terms of its, I hesitate to call it simple, but its relative simplicity. It's very, it's abstract, but it's very direct. A lot of the other pieces that I started before this, I was still trying to do something that was more narrative or more representational, something that had an obvious meaning A, but then if you stop to think about it, maybe you might get to meaning B and C. Whereas with this, I was trying more so to create something that, whether you think it's accessible or not, because I don't know, it's at least not being anything other than what it is. And so I would say that this is sort of a reduction and a simplification and a distillation of all the other pieces.
Right, I can,
Yeah. Leticia.
So, can I ask a two-part question?
Sure.
So, I think you all heard in the gallery, like my experience with the autofocus, and it's just like where it's not looking at me, like this, so it's like self-revelatory moment. It's like, I want to be seen. So I was curious about what you thought we might experience, but also the idea of that being in relationship with other people and what you thought, like what individuals might experience with this piece and what we might experience as a part of community.
So this is actually Did someone say something?
Mhm.
Sorry, hearing things. This is actually the first time that I've had more than 2 people or 3 people or so in the room at the same time with the piece. And so I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I was kind of worried that it would just not really work because you'd always kind of have someone standing in front of the camera, or you'd have, too many people milling about that all the images would become indistinct. And I mean, what do you mean it wouldn't work? I mean, of course, that's part of the intent. No, I was actually pleasantly surprised by how much I felt like it had an impact on the way that people stood in the space, and it had an impact on how they moved through the space. That's really what I wanted to create, was something that people were aware of as them being a part of it and being in relationship to it. And I felt like that was successful, and I felt like, again, what you were saying about the autofocus, I did leave that on purpose. That the camera sort of, this machine making a choice that, we don't necessarily have control over. Yeah, I was quite pleased with how that turned out.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
I was intrigued by how many of us stepped close to look inside your machine.
Yeah.
And as someone who's followed this process, I was surprised by that, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about the inner part of the machine.
I hesitate to say that it's not the intended viewing angle, because something that's been important to me about this piece, I've had people ask me stuff like, oh, are we allowed to touch it? Or like, what, is it okay if we, whatever. I have not set it up to encourage people to peer inside or to touch the beads or to, pull back the curtain. But it was important to me that it be sturdy enough that if someone did, it could take it. Because I feel like that experience, that physicality, that ability to be present with it, to say, well, what is in here? What is this? How does this work? Is an important part of the message. And I think there's not really anything in there. And I'll let you do with that what you will.
So today we were walking down knowing we were going to see something.
Yes.
We didn't know what, right? It was, we're going to go see Nils' project. Tomorrow, when you have the opening and people that have not been part of this presentation or knowing you were leading up to it are going to walk through the gallery and stumble upon this, what are you hoping to watch them do, or how will they interact with it?
I would like to see a little bit of, like a monkey in front of a mirror type stuff, like, oh, hey, that's me. That would be my hope. But like bare minimum, and those of you that were there to see it, you may be able to say, bare minimum, I like people like, oh, that's different. I haven't seen something like that before. That's interesting. That's visually engaging. That's the lowest bar I'm hoping to clear. I hope that people who don't stop to spend another second thinking about it go, oh, cool. Beyond that, though, I do hope that it creates a little bit, like what I was saying in response to Leticia's question, that sort of changes the way that they interact with the space. I know some people are uncomfortable on camera. I know some people are more than comfortable on camera. Some people like making a show, So I hope that sort of that changes it changes the way that they behave and the way that, but also encourages them to think about the fact that it changed the way that they behave.
Okay, I don't know that it's a question, but it was unexpected. You know how you go into a museum and you want to see a picture, but there's people looking and they're in front of you, and you're like, get out of the way. It's okay, it's my turn. And they're just kind of in the way. And one thing in that space is that I kind of felt like all of a sudden I was aware of everyone in the room, and that we were experiencing this, and people were moving in and out and noticing, and it almost became just this little quick pop-up little community in there together, noticing this thing together, like, look, it's on the wall, and it's like, wait, it's on the wall. And that kind of goes back to your, it feels like you stripped an onion to get finally to this project. And you said once you got there, it helped you answer the question of, am I a kind of person who could build a garden and smile at people? Can you make a connection a little tighter about how this you know, connects to that or connected you personally to that? Because I felt a little bit of that in the room.
I think, I'm going to be brief because we just hit time. But I think for me, I'm very aware of how I show up in a space with other people. Perhaps too aware. And I think that something that this piece does as a mirror is it shows you yourself from an angle and from a perspective that you don't usually get to see yourself, and in a way that you don't usually see yourself. And I think for me, you know, the creative process, as I said, of doing something that was entirely self-directed and self-motivated and for no one other than me, changed about how I relate to myself and to other people, but also creating something that I guess observes without judgment and creates awareness without commentary, to me is sort of part of that relationship of community, where it creates a context, but it doesn't make demands.
Thank you so much, Nils.
Thank you.
Thank you.